In today's show, CJ McCollum is betting the Damian Lillard era is over in Portland. But other than a wager from an old friend, has anything really changed between Dame and the Trailblazers? Welcome to Locked On Blazers. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Trailblazers, your daily Portland Trailblazers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What up, world? It's your past first point guard and Trailblazers reporter, Mike Richmond. You are listening to another episode of Locked On Blazers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, available wherever you get podcasts and also on YouTube. Thanks for making the show your first listen every day. Make it a part of your daily routine. Tell your friends to do the same. Today's episode is brought to you by Bird Dogs. Go to birddogs.com/LockedOnNBA. And when you enter the promo code LockedOnNBA, they'll throw in a free custom Bird Dogs Yeti-style tumbler with every order you make. In today's episode, we're talking about CJ McCollum, who appeared on ESPN's First Take on Wednesday and said if he were a betting man, the Damian Lillard era is over in Portland. And then he hedged and did things that betting men do, which is backtrack a little bit and cover some of their bets. But I think what CJ said is important to at least consider. But it's also what we'll do in the second segment is consider that nothing has really changed. Nothing has really changed. Since what Damian Lillard said at exit interviews, things are kind of still in that exact same spot. But there's a reason that this is still in the news, and I think we need to look that right in the face and address why. And then we'll close the show by cleansing our palates with some mock drafts. A bunch of folks released new mock drafts this week as we're heading into 2 weeks before the NBA draft, and we will talk about who the experts and the insiders see the Blazers pursuing should they make selections with their 2 first-round picks at 3 and 23. But let's start with CJ McCollum. He was on Wednesday's episode of First Take. I think this was airing while I was recording Wednesday's show. I was, if you're an everyday listener, I was on vacation a little bit, so my recording schedule got jacked up a little bit. So I missed this in the cycle, and I apologize. But CJ McCollum, he was on First Take. He's chatting there with Stephen A. And there is like a real thing, and I'm going to use this phrase a bunch here, but I think it exists. Like the trade Dame industrial complex is a real thing that exists, pushed heavily by Stephen A. Smith, one of the great performers that we have in the American media sports scene. Stephen A. kind of has one note, and he plays that note over and over again, and better than anyone else can play one note. That's why he's a star. But they talk about trading Dame all the time. And so today they talked about trading Dame, but they talked about it in part because Damian Lillard had appeared on a Showtime program called The Last Stand with host Brian Custer and kind of reinvigorated the trade interest by specifically naming the Brooklyn Nets and Miami Heat as interested trade destinations. We'll get more into the specifics on that in a moment. I actually talked about it on yesterday's show with Howard Beck. If you have not listened to it, you can go back and listen to that there. It's in your feed. We do this every day, or at least most days now that I'm back from vacation. Every day that I'm back, baby. But we'll talk about that more in a moment. But CJ McCollum, he's on First Take, and they're kind of doing the trade Dame industrial complex dance, but in part because it's still in the news. And CJ McCollum kind of lays out the exact situation very clearly. CJ is he has a good grasp on exactly sort of where the Blazers stands, and he says, among other things, and several comments, several questions and follow-ups, and maybe about 3 full minutes on this, says like, Damian Lillard wants to be there. The Blazers want to be there, but the team is at a crossroads. They have a bunch of assets to go one of two directions, to like try to get veterans and get Dame help, or to go young and go the other way. And that obviously their preferences and Dame's preferences to do it in Portland and all those things. But the reality is they have come to a difficult position. And CJ said it well. He said the market will dictate what happens here. This is kind of something that I've mentioned in previous podcasts. That's me tooting my own horn. But like in previous podcasts is that some of the sort of challenge with trading Dame or trading for a veteran to help Dame is like, what's the market for Dame? What's the market? What's going to be the asking price to get a veteran in Portland? Like the market dynamics will determine, will have a big impact on what the Blazers are able to do. Like if they're able to pull this off in either direction, the market dynamics will dictate sort of what trades are available in which direction they choose to go. And maybe they'll try to go one way and the market dynamics will push them. The market will push them the other way. It's just kind of the nature of the trade market and every team maneuvering. And then after that comment, CJ McCollum continued, and I'm gonna read here. I transcribed this quote, and I'm going to read it here. He said, "I think as an organization, they're at a crossroads. If I was a betting man, I would say this is the last we've seen of him there." And he repeated, "If I was a betting man, I would say this is the last we've seen of him there. But I'm not a betting man, and I think he's going to let this play out." Unprompted, CJ McCollum, I mean, not unprompted, that's not true, Michael. Prompted specifically to talk about the Damian Lillard situation, CJ said if he was a betting man, he kind of just put it, he said what he thinks, that it is likely that the Dame, if he had to bet, that the Dame era is done. This is the last we've seen of him there. Acknowledging, however, the very obvious thing. Neither of the sides necessarily want that to be the case, at least publicly. Privately, who knows? And maybe we'll know when something else happens, but publicly, the Blazers want Dame to be there. Dame wants to be there. They both kind of know the marching orders, get veteran help. Dame wants to have as CJ McCollum said, a puncher's chance to be considered contenders. And right now, the Blazers roster does not have a puncher's chance to be considered contenders. They're like a borderline playoff team if everyone's healthy and back. They're a play-in team. It's what the roster was this year. The reason they've had to tank each of the last two seasons because they've been bad up to a point where it's like, we're not good enough to compete. Let's go the other way. But CJ McCollum saying this isn't nothing. It is not the trade Dame industrial complex. It is not Stephen A. Smith pining for him to be on the Knicks. In fact, CJ McCollum shot down the Knicks even chances to get Dame. He specifically singled out Miami and Brooklyn. But this isn't that. Like, this is part of maybe that larger ecosystem where the sort of talking head shows, instead of talking about things that happen in the basketball court, talk about transactions. And I think that's in some ways by sort of the Shams Charania, Adrian Wojnarowski coverage of the league. Like, this is what sells, quite frankly, this is what sells my podcast. If you want to keep it a buck, go look at the video views on YouTube. You see what sells. People love this stuff. They eat it up. That's why they talk about it on TV. It's part of that ecosystem, the trade Dame industrial complex. It's part of that world. But CJ saying it is a little bit different because CJ and Dame are friends. And CJ is also the head of the players union. And he's also like, he wouldn't just say this to say this in the way that other people who get paid to yell on ESPN might say it just to say it. It's different. It's different. It just is. I kind of think that's undeniable. It's just, it's how you have to take the CJ McCollum saying this differently than you would take a professional sports yeller saying it. But, and I think this is an important but, nothing has really changed. And CJ McCollum acknowledged as much. From the moment that Dame kind of made it clear what his preferences were at exit interviews, nothing has changed. This is still in the news cycle for a specific reason that we'll talk about in the second segment, but nothing has changed. And Damian Lillard's comments on Brian Custer's The Last Stand show indicated as much. Nothing has really changed. There are more louder voices suggesting that this could be the end of the era. And this is CJ McCollum, a friend and former teammate of Dame, kind of saying if he had to bet, he bets it's the end of the era. But he knows this is not what either side wants, which is acknowledging the challenge of doing the next big thing, which we've discussed ad nauseum on this show, but also the reality that the hard decision could come this summer. But I'll say it again. I'll probably say it 3 more times this episode. I repeat myself a lot. It's kind of this is my shtick in some ways. Nothing has changed. Let's talk about how little has changed in the second segment. But first, I want to tell you about a championship team. eBay Motors knows all about a championship team. because you got to make sure every player is the perfect fit. It's the same when it comes to your vehicle. Every part needs to fit just right. So the next time you need parts and accessories, head to eBay Motors. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, you can be sure every part you need fits just right the first time around. Just add your ride to my garage. Look for the green check to know the part will fit or your money back, because just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game when you shop on eBay Motors. With over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll be back in the game in no time. After all, it's easy to bring home a win when the right parts are guaranteed. Get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices on ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. That's eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. All right. Nothing's changed. Even if CJ McCollum, who I'm sure knows more than us, maybe not you might be listening and know a lot, more than me, and more than let's say the average listener. I'm gonna just make an assumption, more than the average listener. He's betting that the era is over. But, and I think call a spade here. But what has changed since exit interviews? Nada. Not a dang thing. At exit interviews, Damian Lillard laid out his preference. I want a chance to win. I want them to trade. I don't want 19-year-olds. I want them to trade the draft picks, whatever it might be, because I don't want to build. I want them to trade for veteran help to go for it. He said, that's enough for 19-year-olds. He said that he doesn't want to be involved in building something that's 2 and 3 years away. He wants to go for it right away. He explained the very urgent approach he wanted his team to take and his front office to take. He was abundantly clear with that message. And Joe Cronin, while he didn't echo that specifically because it's kind of like not the best way to approach it, he said that they want to maximize the Damian Lillard timeline, which if you're maximizing the Damian Lillard timeline, if you're building with Dame and Dame says trade the pick and do this, it is what it is. That is very clearly the Blazers' approach to take. On the show with Brian Custer, The Last Stand on Showtime that we talked about in yesterday's episode, it's Dame, while he went long on wanting to play in Miami and Brooklyn without a lot of prodding. Like, he was asked. It was like he didn't bring it up on his own. He was asked, what do you say to trade rumors about Brooklyn and New York and Miami? And he said, yeah, of those places, I want to go to Miami, and because I like Bam, Bam Adebayo's my dog, and if not, Brooklyn would be my second choice. That's real. I trust Dame when he says that those are his two non-Blazer places to play. But in that same interview, he says, that he expects to be on the team in the fall and that he wants them to do it. But in that same interview, he says the same thing he said a million times. The Blazers have the assets to get things done, and if they're unable to get it done, then they're going to have the conversation. Nothing has changed. He's been saying that a bunch. The reason it is in the conversation, the reason that I'm still doing the show today, this is not the show I planned on doing, thanks Damian Lillard, I guess thanks CJ McCollum. The reason that this show exists and this like series, I was going to do an episode, but like this rundown exists and the structure of the show exists, and the reason that CJ McCollum was talking about it on First Take on ESPN is because Damian Lillard keeps talking about it. To ignore Dame's role in all of this is to go full ostrich. If you would like to hide your head in the sand and blame a national media conspiracy for the obsession with trading Dame, you are welcome to. It is simply untrue. The national media has done this trade Dame industrial complex thing for years. For years. It has been when they talk about the Blazers, because the games come on too late at night and they just don't watch them, they are not talking about Trendon Watford and Anthony Simons and what a good screen setter Yusuf Nurkic is. They are talking about trading Dame to a market on the Eastern Seaboard so they could stay up late enough to watch a guy that they've heard is good. They've seen him on a couple national television games a year. They've watched his Modelo ads. They enjoy his work with State Farm and Hulu. They find him extremely compelling, and they've seen the highlights. They know he bombs away from deep because they've seen the playoff games. But when they talk about the Blazers in the past, they talk about trading Dame because that's what they have. That's it. That's the trade Dame industrial complex. This is not really that. This is Damian Lillard, every time he's asked about this, continuing to plant the seeds that if this doesn't happen, I might be elsewhere in a way that he has simply not done in the past. Even back in 2021, when Damian Lillard was very, very clearly considering moving on from the Blazers, he took a freaking meeting at LeBron James's house with Anthony Davis, and it said, actually, no, I don't want to go to the Lakers. He was asked publicly after it was reported by True Hoop that Damian Lillard was going to ask for a trade. He said, no, I haven't asked for a trade, but I haven't decided what my future will be while under contract for 3 more seasons. He has been down this road before, but not like this. This is different. This is putting pressure on them at X interviews, and this is doing an interview on Showtime, and when asked about playing at other places, answering it honestly. Dame is too smart for you to think he isn't doing this on purpose. It is insulting to suggest that this is some sort of creation of the media. The media has created this in the past from whole cloth, and I will include myself grouped in that, right? Like, I make content about this team all the time. I'm a media member, straight up. Like that. I am part of the machine. So, you know, I'm the fingers point back or whatever the phrase is. Like when you point point back at you. I don't know. Ask your grandma. But like that, the trade Dame industrial complex is a separate thing from Dame continuously doing this. Saying that this is not. Ignoring Dame's role in it ignores why Dame keeps friggin' doing it. He's too smart to skip out on this. This isn't coming from nowhere. When he gets an opportunity, Dame is putting public pressure on the franchise and putting a finer, to use a Chauncey Billups phrase, putting a finer point on it, putting an address on it, and saying, if not here, Brooklyn. If not here, Miami. South Florida. He's never really done this with the specifics and the pressure and the continued pressure. You know, he did it at X interviews. He did an interview with Stephen A. Smith on ESPN2 about 10 days later. He's doing this here on Showtime. Like, Dame knows what he's doing. Dame is making it very clear what he wants. Nothing has largely changed. The Blazers have said they want to follow Dame's plan. Dame has laid out the plan. Nothing has changed. Nothing since X interviews. But Dame keeps doing this, and he keeps doing this for a reason. Because he wants to continue to put public pressure on him. He could opt out. He could opt out of doing this. And I think, I don't want to be, I'm not trying to be alarmist by any means. So that is absolutely not my goal. I think, generally speaking, Dame is doing this for a reason. He is saying what he's saying for a reason. Because he wants to make sure the message gets out there and the message stays out there. And for the first time, it feels like, it felt like this in summer 2021. But I think for the first time since then, 2 years later, that if CJ's kind of reading the tea leaves, and I think if you at home are getting a little nervous, it's like there are some teeth to the idea that the era could end. Nobody wants it to go that way. Dame doesn't want to go that way. He's been clear about it. I mean, at least publicly. Who knows what he wants in private? Publicly, like, Dame's been clear. He wants to do it here. He said it a million times. He says it ad nauseum. But now when he speaks, he puts pressure on them with, if not then, we will have this conversation. He hasn't done that in the past. He hasn't done that. If my preferences, if they can't do what I want to do, I want to do this somewhere else. He keeps doing it. And the reason it's in the news is because Dame keeps doing it. And the reason he keeps doing it is because he wants it in the news. He's part of the trade Dame industrial complex. Live long enough to see yourself become part of the complex. Okay. Let's cleanse ourselves with some mock drafts. A bunch of NBA draft insiders released their latest mock drafts. I'm going to share them with you in the third segment. But first, I want to tell you about Bird Dogs. They're comfy shorts. They sent us over a couple pairs. And what I like about them is that they sent us kind of like an athletic looking one, like sort of workout pants, and more of a chino type pants. These are fancy enough that you could get away with wearing them to some place where you got to look good, but they are comfy enough that you could, go to the beach. You could go play pick up hoops in these things. They got liners inside of them, so they hold, they got compression liners inside. They grab your legs. They make your legs look good. I'm rocking the 5-inch inseam. I'm feeling good. I'm looking good. I'm wearing versatile shorts. I'm getting compliments from the people I live with. Life's good when I'm wearing Bird Dogs. So why don't you go to birddogs.com/LockedOnNBA, enter that promo code LOCKEDON, and get a free Yeti-style tumbler with your order. That's birddogs.com/LockedOnNBA for a free Yeti-style tumbler. You won't want to take your Bird Dogs off. I promise you. Still a past first point guard. I'm still Mike Richmond. You are still listening to Locked on Blazers. Okay, went long on the trade Dame stuff. Let's cleanse our palates with some mock drafts. Bunch of NBA, I did mocks again. NBA draft experts released their mock drafts today, updated mock drafts today, or this week rather, I should say. Most of them came out on Monday. We're 2 weeks away from the NBA draft as you're listening to this. This is Thursday, June 8th episode. Let's talk about who's going where according to the experts and cleanse our palates a little bit. Over at The Ringer, Kevin O'Connor has the Blazers taking Scoot Henderson at 3 and Olivier Maxence Prosper at 23. Scoot, according to KOC, the Hornets are sort of leaning Brandon Miller, whether it be for fit reasons or because because he's 6'9" and it's a wing league and all, and like some defensive upside, some playmaking upside, and real high level scoring in a 6'9" frame is deeply intriguing. Brandon Miller's a darn good prospect. It wouldn't surprise me if he went there. Like if the Blazers are rebuild mode, I think I probably would lean Scoot. In a world where they're trying to keep 3, I think Brandon Miller's an obviously better fit with sort of their veteran core, to be sure. But KOC that's Kevin O'Connor, has the Blazers taken Scoot and admits that it's kind of a funky fit, but you just can't pass on the talent. And the Blazers, if they don't make a trade, in his world, he's kind of it's just a mock draft. It's not the whole mock off season. So take the best player on the board, figure it out from there. This would be the figure it out portion of the program. Olivier Maxence Prosper is a dude who absolutely popped off at the NBA draft combine, a 6'8" forward with some defensive versatility. Went to the combine, kicked butt in the scrimmage portion with just high energy stuff, was probably one of the big winners of the combine week, moved himself probably from maybe going back to college to likely being a first round pick. He's someone who my draft friends really like, and if my draft friends like him, I like him too. Defensive versatility, high energy, high motor stuff, like that's the exact type of role player the Blazers need. They need length. They need dudes who rebound. They need dudes who defend. If they build forward with Dame, that's exactly the type of player you need. If they go in another direction, that's what good teams need. More of that. So that is Omax from The Ringer. Over at Yahoo, Kristen Peak has the Blazers selecting Brandon Miller with the 3rd overall pick. I talked about him already. I think, if Dame's on the roster, I would lean that way. The other way, if Dame's not on the roster, I think Scoot is for me, and I'm like a draft novice to be totally clear. I think Scoot is like a better prospect, but your mileage may vary. At 23, Peak has the Blazers taking Chris Murray from Iowa, the brother of Keegan Murray, who went in the lottery to the Kings last year. Chris Murray is someone I like, productive. He's 23. He's going to be 23 at the draft, so maybe he doesn't have much upside, but productive lefty who can score in a bunch of different ways and probably projects as a role player with a relatively high floor early in his career by virtue of already being 23 years old. There's some value there. Maybe not like the biggest upside swing at 23, and like depending on kind of the direction of the franchise, you might want to go with a bigger upside swing. But if they stay there, you might get real talent in Chris Murray. At ESPN, Jonathan Givony has the Blazers taking Scoot Henderson at 3. He also has the sort of, the whispers are that the Hornets are leaning towards Brandon Miller, although this time of year is a great time of year to lie, as I've said on the show in the past. So perhaps it means nothing, right? Perhaps the whispers are Charlotte sending a huge smokescreen or, whatever it might be. So it seems like right now, like as, 2 weeks out, it seems like the Hornets are leaning Brandon Miller. A lot can change in 2 weeks. That'll be curious. But Givony has Scoot falling to the Blazers, and Givony says that Dame and Scoot Henderson could play together, and I think talent can play together. Like I think that's true. But like in reality, could the Blazers really sort of like relaunch 3.0 Dame with another guard under 6'2"? It's like it's outrageous. Yes, they could, and they might, and they might, but it seems like it would just be bonkers. It would be bonkers. I would tease them a little bit on how silly it would be to do it a third time. But Scoot's a really good prospect, and if you're at 3, kind of just come what may. Givony at ESPN has the Blazers taking James Nagy from an 18-year-old, almost 19, from who's playing in Barcelona. In Europe, typically teenagers just don't play a bunch, but this is a big rim-running, rebounding, shot-blocking center, really good athlete, built like a Mack truck. I am very intrigued by Nagy. I think if you're drafting him, you are waiting. Like he hasn't turned 19 yet. He's an 18-plus-year-old. You're waiting for the potential to come. This is the upside swing. If you're swinging for upside, I think this is as intriguing for me as an intriguing to big man as there is in the back half of the draft. I think if Derek Lively is there, you can make that discussion. But I think the reporting suggests that Lively is going to climb up the draft boards and be as successful as all those other Duke bigs who've been so good in the league. Over at Bleacher Report, Jonathan Wasserman has the Blazers taking Scoot at 3, and then at 23 he has them taking Max Lewis, Pepperdine wing. Skinny, 6'7", scores at all 3 levels, played on really bad Pepperdine teams, so I forgive you if you haven't seen him. I certainly haven't seen him play, but I was friend of the program, Raphael Barlow, told me that is pretty high on Lewis, so I've watched some of his highlights and stuff. Love his game. Takes kind of crazy shot. Seems like he takes a lot of really hard shots. Maybe his shot diet will change in the league. But he makes a lot of those really hard shots. So maybe it's fine. But 6'7", shoots really well from 3, shot 55% on catch and shoot threes, can score in transition, finish well at the rim. Maybe not a high level defender yet or high level playmaker, but if you're going to be a role player in the league and you can score in transition, really shoot on catch and shoots, you can find the other stuff. Like if you check those boxes, stand on the wing and be ready, and you're a really good catch and shoot shooter and run in transition, you can get on the court with impactful offensive play and then, try to develop playmaking skills, try to sharpen up where you can on defense. But, the league, role players would be better off, probably all role players would be better off if they could defend, dribble, and pass, and then do the other stuff after that. I think Christian Brown for the Nuggets, for example. But I think to get on the floor early, being an elite shooter is like a way to sneak into the rotation and then figure everything out from there. More mock drafts coming. The Athletics, Sam Vecini has his big mock draft and huge draft packet coming out next week. That should be soon over at NBA Big Board. Raphael Barlow is due for another one soon, so we will catch up on those. And in fact, speaking of Raphael Barlow, he's going to be on tomorrow's show. So why don't you come back, tell your friends, and we will talk all things 3, all things 23, some picks. Raphael is does this professionally. He's an NBA scout and a draft scout professionally year round. He's really, really good. You are not going to want to miss tomorrow's show. So come back for that one. Tell your friends to do the same. Make the show your first listen on Friday. Then come back Monday of next week and we'll do 5 more of them. I appreciate you listening. I'll talk to you soon.